So you should know how to do that already. That should not be something new or challenging for you. This should be old hat by now. But what I want to start talking about today are a little more in depth of some of the tools that you've seen me using, and to spend a little bit more time talking about layers and how to use those. The reason is that Photoshop is an amazing tool, and I keep saying that, for working on your images and, enhancing them, changing them, altering them, making things completely from your mind up in Photoshop. So, and like I said, Photoshop is a huge program. We're scratching the surface of it. And if any of you go on in the visual arts at all, graphic design, game design, in any kind of design, chances are you will be using Photoshop in those areas, in your other classes, things like that. And again, it's a huge program, so much to cover, and we're not going to cover it all. You could take a couple of years in Photoshop. I mean, I've taken several, short-term classes, and each one is specific to different things. So we're using Photoshop the way a photographer would use it. Myself, I use it for clients all the time, and ways of looking at images. But we're also going to be looking at some of the things that it allows you to do, and sort of easier ways of doing it, giving you the ability to come back, revisit images, try things out. And so that's what I'm going to be spending a little bit of time on today, is talking about Photoshop. We'll be talking about layers, your ability to save your image, to go back, find it, and to rework it. So with that said, we're going to be focusing on sort of layers today. And I've used layers. I've talked about them briefly. But I want to spend a little more time on it. So right over here now on my desktop, I have a layers palette here. If you don't have one, you can go to Window, Layers. If it has a check mark by it, that means that it's already open. If I do this, it will go away, or it looks like it goes away. I can always go to Window, Layers, and turn it on. I can also hit these arrows up here, which will collapse it, and now it puts it over here. And if I click on it, they will come back. I can just open it. So that is the layers palette. And I just went through a lot of things very quickly, but like I said, I do go things fairly quickly. If you want to, you can watch the video over, or we'll be seeing these same things happen again and again and again. So this is the layers palette. Now, when I look at the layers, here's my image out here. Now, remember, we're in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, difference between Photoshop and Camera Raw is that Photoshop, I am working on pixels. Camera Raw, I'm giving directions of ways to see the image until I take it into Photoshop, and then it turns those into actual pixels. Remember, pixels are the little squares that make up this image. So, and if we take the magnifying glass and we come over here and look, you start to see the breakdown. So each one of those little squares is assigned a color, and they are basically a mosaic that comes together to make your image. So when we work in Photoshop, we are moving those little squares, those little pixels around. Now, okay, what to understand about layers is that right now, this layer, and it's called background, and it's got a little over here. What we're talking about is the canvas is the thing where the pixels exist. So when things are off your canvas, there are no pixels, and we'll be taking a look at why that's important. Again, my connection's failing, and I'm right here next to my router. Anyways, so what I want you to understand, when you're working in a background layer is different than when it says layer, and I'll show you why. So right over here in our toolbox, we've looked at some of these tools. We're going to revisit some of them again today. Down here are colors, and this is what's called foreground color and the background color. Up here, you see that little thing that's black and white? those are your default foreground and background. When I click those, now it gives me black in the foreground and white in the background. I'm going to talk about selecting colors and doing that later. But right now, I'm just going to default to black and white. This little arrow here means I can switch them. Now white becomes my foreground color and black becomes my background color. If you don't understand why, don't worry about it. When we get into using color, it'll make more sense. But the reason I'm telling you that right now is we've used a selection tool before, so that shouldn't be new. So I'm going to go ahead and select a rectangle right through here. Now remember, anything within the marching ants, I'm making hand gestures as if I'm lecturing to you, you can't even see them. Anything inside those marching ants are active pixels. So if I take my finger and I hit the option key, the command key, see how the scissors come up? And as I cut and move those pixels, I move it over and it fills them in with white down here. Okay. If I take my other finger and I hit delete, I don't know where it came up with that. And I hit delete, because it's a background, I'm going to hit background color. It's going to fill it in with white. Okay. So whenever you're in a background, it's going to fill that in with pixel information. So those are all white pixels. Reverting my image back to where I start, or last place I saved it. All right, now what I want you to understand is if I double click on this, I can name this layer, whatever I want to call it. I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to leave it layer 0. And if I select an area through here and I hit delete, hold on one second. Sorry. And I hit delete. See how within those marching ants now, I get this checkerboard pattern? What the checkerboard pattern is, means that there's nothing there. It's empty. So why is that important? Well, I'm going to show you. If I select it all right now, if I went to Command A, select all and hit delete, I have no pixels there at all right now. All right. So your canvas is kind of like this clear piece of plastic. Now, whenever I redo a layer, I go down here to plus, I can duplicate a layer. So now I take these pixels and it just makes a copy of it, like a Xerox. It's just another piece of plastic with the pixel information on them. Why is that important? Well, that's what we're going to start looking at, why that's important. And here's what's going to happen. Whenever I have a layer up here, so let me take this layer down here and let me go to image adjustments. Oh, and when I say let me take this layer down here, what I'm saying is when this bar is active, now this is the one where I'm going to change the pixels. If I go to image adjustments, levels, and I slide this over to black, you're not seeing anything happen. See how that's because those pixels are under this one. So if this little eye makes these visible or not visible. Okay. So now I'm looking at the pixels on the lower layer. If I went to image adjustments, black and white, I could turn that one into a black and white image. Again, those are the pixels on this layer below. If I turn this layer on, it's covering them. But watch what happens. If I go ahead and take my lasso tool, and I'm just selecting them. Here, this is a magnetic lasso tool. I'll talk about this one at a later time. So now those marching ants in there. Now if I hit, oops, I want to make sure the top layer is active. So I have the bar going on here. If I hit delete, see how it shows me the black and white face from below? If I make the black and white image not visible, now I just see transparent. Okay, so that is the way layers lay over top of each other. They're like plastic sheets with pixels on them. You can change the pixels on each layer, and you can bring other things in and out. Okay, so that layer below is covered by this one. I also have the pacifiers to change how much of the top layer shows through and allow the bottom layer to show through. So now here was the color layer, here's the black and white layer. I've changed the opacity of this, which means you get to see through it more. It's like thinning it out, okay? And if I put this layer on, now I get part black and white, part color. So you see how it toned it down? If I take this layer still active and I slide the opacity all the way back up, now I've just got color over top of them. All right, I know this is a lot of information, and for some of you it's going to make perfect sense. Others of you are like, what is happening? I don't get it. We'll keep building on it. I just want you to sort of understand how the layers are working as we move forward. Okay, now if any time I don't like a layer, I can always drag it to the trash and get rid of it. Okay, now again, if I change the opacity of that layer, now there's nothing below it. You start to see the checkerboard because it's transparent. It's also telling you what opacity you have, whether it's 100%, you can't see anything through, down to 0, which is nothing's there. So, okay, so now that's a quick intro with a lot of information into layers and how they're working. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One, we're going to be using them a lot now moving forward. So I want you to have a kind of foundational understanding of how they're working. All right. And you know, it's a lot to keep in mind, and I will make mistakes as I do my demos. You'll see I'll forget to make a layer active. I'll be working on one layer and not realizing why am I not seeing the change? It's because I have the wrong layer selected, or I only have part of a layer selected. I only have marching ants in an area, and I'm trying to do something and it's not working. All of these things become frustrating. Sometimes you just have to slow down and take it step by step as to what's going on. All right. So today's demo, what I want to do is I'm going to come back up here and go to File Revert, which is the last place I saved this image. So today's demo, we're going to be starting with layers, and I'm going to be showing you them because we're going to work on them fairly quickly and easily. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to take this image, and right now it sort of exists in this in-between state. It kind of looks like a photo that you might have shot. The lighting's okay. You know, the portrait looks all right, but it's not great. It's kind of in between for me right now. You know, it's not the traditional sort of composition. It's got some negative space, but not a lot. You know, you could either make it really odd and give it a bunch of empty space, you know, negative space, or you could make it more traditional. I'm going to take the crop tool. And when I click on the crop tool, you will see that I'll get this thing that looks almost like a pool table, these like little bumpers here on the sides. And you'll see this arrow that tells me I can move the corners. So as I move, you notice how it's just changing the window and part of my canvas is hanging off to the side. Well, that's because when I hit return, I've cropped that canvas down. Okay, so undo, revert. All right. So first I want to do, I want to crop this image. So I get this. Now you also notice that as I click on a corner, get the little tic-tac here? That's because what that's telling me is, it's helping me rule of thirds. Oh, here's your perfect center. Where do you want your focal point? So, again, that rule of thirds is we use all the time to sort of set up our compositions. Also up here, you'll notice it says original ratio, square, 4x5, 5x7. So if I wanted to crop this to a square image, I was making something online, or I'm doing this portrait for a book jacket and they need a square image, not the standard photo that I shot, or if I need a 4x6 or a 5x7, I can click on any of those. Okay, I can also decide I can set presets, or I can go with the original ratio, which means that it will keep the height and the width within the same as I move this. So that's an original. So I'm moving the corner, even if I move the center, it's going to move the height and the width together to keep it in the original ratio. If I want to just crop with no ratio, now I can just go ahead and move this box around wherever I just want to crop it. Say I just wanted to crop down to his eyes. This would allow me to do that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take the crop tool. I'm going to go ahead and keep it at the original ratio. And as I crop this, what I'm looking at is that tic-tac-toe. I'm going to make it a more traditional sort of looking portrait. So I'll like it in there a little bit more t-shirt. I'm going to, I like to keep, the leather jacket is a signifier. He's kind of, I'm going to put the eyes up here. So that becomes the focal point. Make his, make his face more square here. But again, as I turn him, some of this will not be on the canvas, which, I've done this and I've shown you ways to sort of fix that. But all right, so I'm going to go ahead and crop to there. All right. Yeah, actually, I don't even like that. Let me go back. Let me crop it again. I want to make his face more apparent. So let me crop it again. Bring this in more. Bring this side in more. Maybe I'll turn it just a touch. Trying to keep the collar in, face. All right, that looks pretty good to me. That looks like your standard cropping for a book jacket, or a traditional sort of thing. Now, here's the deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up his face. So if I zoom in, you can see here, he's got some wrinkles. I don't like the discoloration here. I don't like some of these veins and things like that. His teeth are a little yellow. Yes, I know they're all judgments and judging people in their physicality, and I know it's politically incorrect, but let's face it, we all like better portraits of ourselves. We all think we look better than we do, first of all. When I touch up portraits for people all the time, I don't tell them, and they're like, oh, this is great. Sometimes I overdo, and people go, wait, what's happened here? But for the most part, I can touch people up and they just think they look that good, Unfortunately, I have to look at myself all the time right now. I see my wrinkles, all that. If this were a photo, I'd be touching them up. I'd get rid of them and I wouldn't have to know they existed. Okay. So we're going to be sort of like a plastic surgeon. We're just going to give that little bit of help. Now, it is up to you to decide how much is acceptable. And we'll take a look at that as we move forward. So normally, If I wanted to get rid of like that blemish here, these little veins, all that kind of stuff going on in his face, I could just take my spot healing brush. Remember how to make it bigger and smaller. I spent some time on that. I'm using the bracket keys. And if I want to get rid of that thing, I just click on it. And this is what's so great about the computer is it just does that for you, right? So I could just start cleaning it up. Now, here's what we're going to do different today. That's how I've been showing you how to do things. The thing is, once you do that, you're working on this pixel information. You are changing the image, okay? If I want to, I could save at any point, and that's where I would revert my image back. But if I just hit revert now, I go back to that last place I saved it. Now you'll notice it goes back to where I first opened it. It doesn't have the crop that I did. It doesn't have the turn, all that kind of stuff. I can also go to this window called History. Ooh, what is this? Well, this is amazing because see here, it shows everything I've done from the beginning of when I opened the image to right now where I reverted. These were all the steps I took in there. Depending on how much space your computer has available to it, how much hard drive space and all that kind of stuff, each one of these steps takes up some room. So I have mine set pretty high because I keep all my images on other drives. So I try to keep as much free space on my computer as possible. So I like this because if all of a sudden I'll be like, geez, I shouldn't have done that. And I can go back different steps. So let's go back to where I cropped it before I did any of the spot healing, okay? That is the last place I cropped it. Now, when I come back over here to my image, that's where I'm back to. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to make a new layer. So I went down here to the plus sign and I created a new layer. You'll notice it's a layer and it's got the little checkerboard pattern in it. It's just an empty piece of plastic that I've set on there. Why would I do that? Well, here's the amazing thing. Are you ready? I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make sure that layer is active. I'm going to zoom back in on his face. I'm going to take my spot healing brush, just like I did before. I'm going to make this brush a little smaller. I'm going to click on that. Oh, see, I've already made a mistake. This layer is active. So the reason why it's not getting rid of that is because there's no pixels there. I have to come up here. I want it to be content aware. I want to make sure it samples all layers. And now when I click, it's so I would like to say that I made that mistake so I could show you that. I just forgot. So I have to make sure that across the top here, stupid control bars in my way today. Across the top here, I want to make sure that it's content aware, proximity match, and sample all layers. So I want all or content aware. I want to look at things around it. All right, I come over here to this one and this one and this one. And it looks like I'm just making those changes like I did before on the background layer. But what I'm going to show you here is, so I'm just getting rid of all these little veins you get as you get older. The harshness of age. And we can go through here. And you know, this is where the sort of art of it comes in. You know, I hate to use that term. Look, if I want to get rid of that blemish, just get rid of that. Because again, you have to decide how much works, how much doesn't. But what I want you to see is, if I turn off the background layer, those are all the little blemishes that I just did. So here he is with this layer on. Watch if I turn it off. See how they all come back? They've all been covered on this layer. So this layer contains the layers of skin that are covering these. Come on. Still don't get what I'm talking about? Well, watch. All right, so I can name these layers. So I'm going to go ahead and name this blemishes. Now I'm going to make a second layer. I'm going to name it wrinkles. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in here and get rid of the wrinkles. And I'm going to do the same thing I just did. I'm going to take my spot healing brush, and I'm just going to run it over these wrinkles. Come on, look at it. Look at it. Just get rid of them. Now, again, you have to decide what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. As far as the wrinkles go, watch. I can just come in here in those eye area. Oh. So what it did there was, it looks, because it says content aware, it's looking all around. So I'm just going to have to go over each one of these wrinkles, or it's going to bring some hair in. And he's very wrinkly. So even when I ask it to get rid of them, it still finds other wrinkles. So it thinks that I want wrinkles. So see that eye that I've just touched up here? Now, why did I do it on its own layer called wrinkles? Well, I'm going to show you. It's just a touch bigger. So those crow's feet there, and I know watching this is like watching paint dry, so I'm sorry. This is why this demo takes longer than it should. Because again, you can get as detailed as you want to get on this. So see how I got rid of those wrinkles? Maybe I'm going to get rid of this one up here. See the difference between that eye and that eye? But why did I put them on their own layer? Why didn't I not just work on the single layer? I could have. But the amazing thing is, remember I talked about that opacity? If I want that wrinkle back in, if I overdid it, I can slide the opacity down. And see how these wrinkles come in? So now you just have them slightly. I get rid of them all, or I can bring some back in. Or I can bring them back in just not as intense as they were, okay? So again, that eye without the wrinkles and with the wrinkles. Come on, look at that difference, all right? All right, I'm sorry, I'm gonna make you bear with me while I go ahead and do the rest of some of these just to get rid of them so you can see. I'm gonna get rid of that over there. I'm going to even get rid of that one there. And again, over here, I'm going to get rid of some of these crow's feet. I'm letting it sort of not do as good a job as I normally would because I don't want to make you have to wait through all of it. Now also, I've zoomed into this area. So what happens sometimes is, that's not as good as I would have liked it over there. Let me get rid of this. And it still tries to keep the contours of his face. Now, again, if I didn't like some of them, I'd go back and undo as I did them. My finger's not working as good as I'd like. What you want to make sure is that, you know, I've zoomed in and you can see how much clean, but I want to make sure that I get the neck too, that you're not leaving some of the areas off. So let me go back up here. His forehead still has a couple of things that I'd like to clean up. And these are all the wrinkles, and especially like these down here on his neck. You know, you don't want, you know, it is just like doing plastic surgery, you know, and plastic surgeons have to be careful that they don't just work on one area of the body and it doesn't match the rest. Same thing here. All right, so that now, I'm going to go back to my blemishes. I'm going to get rid of some of these flyaway hairs on his eyebrows that look a little crazy. Maybe any of these other blemishes here on the nose. So I'm changing out because what I want to be able to do is I want the difference between the blemishes and the wrinkles, because I may not want to bring the blemishes back in, but there may be a time that I want to add just a little bit of the wrinkle back in. And I can do that again by changing the opacity slider. And you can see how now he's kind of aged versus the much darker ones. And that's at 65%. If I get rid of all of them, you can really see the difference here in the wrinkles. Okay. So again, that allows me to bring a little bit of the wrinkle back in and keep him looking like an older guy versus a completely redone. Well, I'm going to work on the teeth now. So let's take a look at the teeth. See how they're just slightly yellow? So there's a few different things I can do, but I'm going to show you this one today. I'm going to take the magnetic lasso tool. Now remember the lasso tool just allows you to draw whatever shape you want. And now remember, the marching ants, the pixels inside of that are active. If I take the magnetic lasso tool, what it does is, as I click and drag it, it tries to find an edge. So I'm trying to just get the teeth. And this magnetic lasso tool is pretty good. So it's looking for an edge in the pixels. So what I've done is I've selected those. Now, if you'll notice the layer that I'm in, the wrinkles layer, that's not where these pixels are. So I have to go back down here to the background layer. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy. And what it's done is it's copied all the pixel information here. And I'm going to go to Edit, Paste. You'll notice it gives me a layer. If I turn all these other layers off, you will see that it's the teeth that I just selected. There's a little extra skin there, but these are now just the pixel information from the teeth. I can go ahead and take my eraser tool and I can clean up. I just want to make sure I have the teeth and not the skin around them or anything like that. I'm just erasing some of those pixels. And again, I'm using a pretty small brush here. All right, now I could just work on these. So if I go to Image Adjustments, Levels, and I just decide I want to make them white or lighter anyways, let me name this teeth. If I turn this on, he looks like a vampire because they're so much different than the other ones. Now, again, I can go to this and change the opacity of it, but they're also still yellow. They're just light and bright yellow now. So I have a couple of options available to me. And what I'm going to do here is I still have it at 100%. So I'm going to go here to Image Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. We've used this slider a few times. I'm going to go ahead and go to the yellows because that's what I want. And if I saturate that color, it makes it more intense. If I desaturate it, it takes it away. I can also make them light. There you have the Joe Biden smile. Or I can take them down and make them just a little bit darker, but I don't want them to be too gray. So what I'd rather do is bring them about to right there. They still look a little, they draw your attention to them. They're not as bright yellow, so they're not that. But again, I can just now go ahead and bring some of the other tooth back in. But look at the difference between those teeth and those teeth. And again, maybe it's too much. Even at 50%, it brightens his teeth up. And that's what I'm trying to do. I get rid of the blemishes, I get rid of the wrinkles. Now it's just, you know, a better looking image. Okay. Now I can go ahead and do this for any other parts of this that I want to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put another layer on here and I'm going to call it skin. Wait, why didn't it let me name it? I'm going to call it skin. And the reason why I'm calling it skin is because as I look at his face here and his neck, there's some things I don't like on the skin. I don't like this hot spot here. I don't like this discoloration here, but I really don't like this difference in color here, this sort of orange and this red. And even on his neck, you know, I'm looking at it now and I'm going, oh, you know, there's a couple blemishes here I want to get rid of. There's still a couple wrinkles here that I don't really like. But even those things, I don't like the red over here and this orange down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the skin layer. Now, here's where the colors come in, the foreground and the background color. I'm going to click on this foreground color. Now I can come through and click any color I want. And when I hit OK, it's going to load it in there for me. Okay. And if I were to take my paintbrush right now and brush, I would brush in that color. But what I want to do is I'm almost going, it's going to be like I'm going to put some powder on him. If you had somebody in the makeup chair and you wanted to even out the color, you would sort of powder them down, you know, and we do this before photos all the time. But I wanted to match his skin tone. So you know how you go to the makeup counter and they have all those powders and you have to try to find the one that matches your skin tone? Well, Photoshop makes it pretty easy. I want this skin tone right there and it shows me it and I hit OK. And it loads it down here into the foreground color for me. I'm going to take my brush now. I'm going to take a fairly big brush. And what I'm going to remember to do up here is to change my opacity. I'm going to bring it down so that now when I paint with it, it's still allowing some of that below to show through. And just like working with powder, all right, so there it is. And you can see how lightly it's done. I'm going to throw this away. I don't like that color, first of all. And I didn't like the way it looked. Let me go ahead and add a new layer. Call it skin. And let me get a different color here. So it shows me the current color. Now I go, oh, you know, that all was just a little too light. I want, oh, that's better, just a little bit darker. Also, my opacity and my flow, I'm going to take the flow down to like 50. I'm going to take the opacity down even lower. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And now as I come in, see how it starts to even the skin tone? If I go over it again, it's going to add to it. So because the opacity is low, it's going to, the more you go, the darker your name. I'm sorry, my connection, I don't know what happens to it. All right, so back here, so I've selected this other color and I'm just sort of going over it, kind of like powder. And you can see how I'm getting rid of this highlight here over the cheek. It's still showing the image through. It's kind of powdering it. Now, this may, that is just suck today. This may change now how I want to change the opacity of my other layers as well. So now that I put this on, again, I'm just coming up here. All right, so that is my skin layer. Now I'm going to go to View, Fit on Screen. And you can see that he's kind of powdered up, sort of looking. But again, I can change the opacity of this and really sort of blend it in. I might want to bring a little bit more of the wrinkles back up because that powder also got rid of some of them. I'm going to leave the blemishes alone. And I think the teeth are still just a little too much. All right. Now, the last thing I want to do on this, and you can see, let me show you. So here, the background layer is where it was right after we cropped it. So basically where we started from. If I turn all these layers off, watch. That's what he looked like. That's what he looks like now. And I tell you, that's not that much, you know, I actually, the wrinkles, I think, should not be quite as. Well, let me turn everything up to 100% and you can see the difference. I'll leave those. So that to that, and then come back in and fine tuning just a bit. All right, so for this assignment, what I want to see is that you can do these things, you know, that you can figure out how to make an image look good. Now, there's a couple other things that I might want to bring back in here. Well, let me go. I'm going to go ahead and add one more layer. I'm going to call it eyes. And I'm going to show you this other tool. This is the sharpen tool. And if I had it all the way up with the flow and the opacity, let me show you what it will do. Sharpen tool. I'm going to go to sample all layers. And see how it sharpens that whole area up? That's going to be way too much. See how it looks like he's really staring at you now? But again, I can bring that opacity slider down, although that doesn't really do what I'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. I'm going to go ahead and add that layer again, call it eyes. And instead, I'm going to take the sharpen tool and I'm going to change the strength of it just a touch more. All right. And maybe even sharpen up the teeth a little bit. I feel like coming back into this wrinkles area, and I didn't clean up the wrinkles as well as I could have, but those are spots on my screen. Okay, so that is a pretty good looking portrait from where we started to where it is now. You know, it just makes him pop a little bit more. Now, I could also come up here, and down here is what's called an adjustment layer. And I want to adjust the levels of the entire image. Because I've made these layers, I can't just go to the background layer and do an adjustment because it wouldn't change the blemishes and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and take this adjustment layer. I want to make the whole thing just a touch darker. But what's nice about this is I can always come back to it. So it's its own layer. I also think he's a little pink for me. So I can go to another layer and I can go. So now those adjustment layers are adjusting all the layers below. There's one more thing I'd like to fix here is the background. I don't like this black fall off right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clone tool. Now remember the clone tool, we've sort of talked about it, but I haven't really shown you what the clone tool can do. So right now it's a brush size, right? I can take my finger and if I hold down the Option key, oh, I'm not in the clone tool. If I hold down the Option key, I get this crosshairs. Wherever I set that crosshairs, and now I take my other hand and I hit the mouse, that sets my clone point. So you see how I put it right on the eye? So I can clone another eye in. You see how it's showing me down below what it's cloning in? So I could go ahead and do something like that. I know everybody's always wowed by the third eye. But what I use it for most times is stuff like this. I just don't like that black up there. I want to bring maybe something more like this in. So I'm going to go ahead and take this as my clone point. And you can see how it's just going to allow me to clone some of that background in. You know, I didn't like the light or dark area, you know, and again, I can choose any of this. And since this is just sort of this modeled background, I don't like what's going on there. Let me see here. I like this color in there. All right. And again, if I don't like what's happening, so I don't really like that, I can take this patch tool and just sort of patch some of this in. All right, so, I'm gonna put another one in here. Let me see how this works. I'm gonna burn this side of his head. I'm gonna go ahead and take my burn tool. And again, I'm burning all right, I'm not burning. I guess that tool won't work that way. I thought it could. All right, scratch that for the moment. I'll come back to that later. All right, so there you can see those are all the things that I have changed in this image. Overlaid on top of that background image. And there we have it. This is what I'd like you to do for the Show Me You Did It. Okay, I'm not going to go through the extra credit today of turning it into a pencil drawing. When you finish now, or as you're going on, you want to go to Save As. And so I'm going to call this Portrait Retouch Demo in Progress. And I'm going to save it as a PSD. Because if I save it as a Photoshop file, it's going to retain all these layers for me. If I go to Save As a JPEG file, now let's see here. Where did I save it to? Let me find that out. Oh, I see. Let me save it to the desktop. My desktop here. So now if I go into Bridge and I go to my desktop, here's the in progress PSD. Oh, that's because that's what I just saved. Sorry. My brain. And then I go to File, Save As, in Progress, JPEG to that desktop. You'll see that I have the two of them there. So here's the JPEG and here's the Photoshop file. But if I go to open the JPEG, you're going to notice all my layers are gone. If I open the Photoshop file, I will have all those layers there and I can come back and make any changes I want. Why is that important? Well, because if you've overdone somebody, they come back and they're like, I don't look like myself. You can come back and you have all your layers. You can adjust it. If you just save it as a JPEG, now you have to try to make adjustments on this thing that already exists there. So the thing with saving it as a Photoshop file, it's going to be a bigger file. It's going to take up more space and all of those sorts of problems that run with that. But what you're going to turn into me is the JPEG version. So I want to see the final image. And again, when you do these, you should be doing them in a manner in keeping with what you think is a good looking image. I want to see that you can use the tools. I want to see that you can do all this, but stick with that. All right. Okay, that's a lot of information for today. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the extra credit. I'm going to go through that After we come back from spring break, I will do a quick redo of this, and then we will take a look at the extra credit portion. So, all right. Let me go ahead now and finish this up.